Hey, Agile folks. Welcome to the next episode of Agile Bytes, the podcast put on by Integrity Inspired Solutions, where we're building software in an agile manner day in and day out. We're in a different room today, so I'm really excited about the acoustics and the new video angles and things like that. I hope it adds a lot more drama to the episode than normal, or at least makes it sound like maybe I'm more in a cave, and it adds that sense of adventure to the episode. Because today we are going to be talking about some adventuresome topics. Specifically, we're going to be talking about that group of people in your organization who are some of the most downtrodden, vilified people you can imagine. Now, of course, you're thinking of upper management, but the surprise twist is that's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking, of course, about project managers. And I want to talk about project managers as an organization begins to grow in their agility. What happens to these people? So the first thing I want to address is there even an issue here? In my experience, there is definitely an issue here. Just about every organization that has started out with project managers running software projects or managing them in kind of a traditional way, sort of that phased gate approach that everyone learned from PMI or what have you, where we identify our milestones and make our Gantt charts and we carefully script out over the next 2 years exactly what's going to happen when. Whenever an organization begins to embrace a project that's more iterative or incremental, more agile, if you will, they always seem to struggle with how do we reconcile this with our project manager's set of skills and the way we've managed projects in the past. Now, if you haven't run into this problem, if you've done sort of traditional project management this whole time and now you're quote unquote doing agile and you've experienced no tension whatsoever with your existing project management practice, well, just call me. I think you just kind of need to get in touch with me at that point. Just get on integrityinspired.com, send me an email, find me on LinkedIn. We probably have a lot to talk about. But I'm guessing that most people listening to this podcast have discovered that once we begin doing projects that way, the traditional project management model becomes difficult. And if we decide to get rid of that model, then what does it mean for the skill set and the knowledge base and the rich experience that our project managers bring to projects? What do? Do we just get rid of all those people? Do we just not need project managers anymore? That's what I want to talk about today. So what do we do now when we are doing agile projects? There isn't a design phase and a build phase. There isn't a requirements gathering phase, or at least those things don't happen at a whole project level. Maybe they happen at more of a feature by feature level, or if you're doing Scrum, maybe a sprint by sprint level. All that work still needs to be done, but now we're doing it in iterative cycles as opposed to doing it for the entire project. I remember one of my very first consulting gigs, this was endlessly frustrating to many of the other teams still working under older project paradigms. They would keep saying things like, well, we can't figure out if you're in the design phase or the build phase. And I'm like, yeah, we are in those phases. We are designing, we're building. There was no clear cut. We started the design on the project, and then 3 months later, we ended the design on the project. So if we're not doing that stuff anymore, and we know that our product can't really be predicted, we don't ultimately know what's going to end up in it or what those things might look like. So we're doing the iterative stuff, we're getting the feedback, we're responding to feedback. The backlog is growing, it's shrinking, we're responding to change. Where does that leave us in a world of Gantt charts and milestones and things like that? Well, the first thing I would recommend is don't necessarily make your project managers Scrum masters. First of all, you might not be doing Scrum, and if you're not, please don't introduce the role of Scrum masters. But if you are doing Scrum and you have Scrum masters, it's sort of a common mistake for organizations to decide, well, we'll just take all of our project managers and now they're Scrum masters now. So now they're project managers that also have to run Scrum events. And that is rarely helpful or productive for any of the parties involved. Being a Scrum master requires its own set of knowledge and skills that your project managers might have. It's not that they can't be Scrum masters, it's not an automatic conversion. And vice versa. The things that your project managers used to do are not things that are expectations of a Scrum master or the value that a Scrum master brings to your organization. They're two really different things. So you don't want to just give your project managers a new job title and now we're doing agile project management. That's not really the way it works. Having said that, if your project manager does have the skill set and knowledge base of a Scrum master, then by all means, there's nothing wrong with them fulfilling that responsibility. So if we can't just automatically convert them to Scrum Masters, what are we going to do with them? And I would offer that project managers in an agile world can do more active management than they were ever able to do under the old rubric. If I think about the way I experienced project managers for most of the development projects I did as a developer, what appeared to us was this person would come out with the plan. They would talk to a lot of people. They would identify every risk that we could think of. They would come up with this master timeline that was very elaborate with the different milestones. And what they would do then is, as the project progressed, they would go around and ask these people, is this still on track? Are we still on track to meet this timeline? Are these milestones still going to be hit? Inevitably, there would come a point, usually day 2, where it became evident that this was not going to match up. And then it was an exercise of that person trying to get people to get their work to fit the timeline again. So we're behind a week. Well, what are we going to do to get back on track? When this is the role a project manager plays, everybody kind of hates this person. The people who are doing the work hate somebody continually asking them, are you done yet? Are you done yet? Do you think you're going to be done? When do you think you're going to be done? They hate that, right? They end up lying or not giving any information out. And the whole oh, you missed the deadline that we planned on 3 months ago. So what are you going to do to remediate that? Well, a lot of times there's nothing you can do to remediate that. You just got the deadline wrong. The work ended up being a lot more complex or variable than you thought 3 months ago. And then you look at upper management. Upper management tends to hold project managers accountable for project health, which is the weirdest thing when you think about it, right? Out of all the people involved in a project, who has the least direct impact on how the project is actually going? Ironically, it is the people we call project managers. A lot of times they are just trying to shuffle information between two groups that have competing interests. Both of those groups are blaming the project manager for their troubles, even though the project manager has created none of these troubles. So in an agile environment, I would contend that project managers have a real opportunity to actively contribute to project health. So one of the things that I recommend project managers in an agile environment get into is the metrical analysis of flow. Now, we have previous podcast episodes that talk about this, ways to get started in metrics, very easy things that you can start doing to sort of dip your toes into that river a little bit. But there's much, much more, obviously. And as we begin to learn how to keep flow metrics, and we learn about cycle times, and we learn about cumulative flow diagrams, and we learn about Monte Carlo simulations, project managers are great shepherds of our metrics. Obviously, they don't generate the metrics, but keeping an eye on the metrics, helping us interpret them, almost like keeping their fingers on the pulse of what's going on. And when you're using metrics to get this information and to make these decisions, you don't have to go around and ask anybody anything about how long things are taking. I don't have to ask my developer team, are you done with this yet? I can see on the metrics. I don't have to ask them, how long do you think this feature is going to take? I can look at our metrics at how long our features are taking and see. If someone wants to lie to me, they're going to have to be super creative because I can just look at the metrics and see what's going on. So that's kind of step one. If you are a project manager transitioning into an agile world, I very much recommend you get into flow metrics. So why is that? Well, first of all, now you have an objective way to monitor the factors in how your project is progressing. How long is it taking things? Were your initial estimates realistic? Are you going to hit milestones, miss milestones? And oftentimes you'll be able to tell months and months in advance instead of days in advance, which is a huge advantage. But the second thing is, once you learn how to acquire and interpret these metrics, now you can start contributing to some of these problem-solving solutions that Agile teams are just littered with. For example, when teams are having their daily stand-up, you can attend those stand-ups. You can see the work that's on the board. You can see what cards are aging and what cards are fairly new. Now, you're not doing the work, so I would highly recommend you not chime in with your opinions all the time on what you think the rest of the team should be doing. But that's going to be useful information for you, because then as you're monitoring project health and you're trying to decide what should be the priority or where we should pay the most attention, if you've got cards that have been sitting on your board for days and days and days and days and other cards that are brand new, then you might encourage your team, how about we focus on these things that have been sitting around and get those out the door instead of everybody jumping into the bright, shiny new thing. The interesting thing to me is in an agile world, most project managers become huge advocates for things like WIP limits, because as they watch the way the metrics work, they're like, hey, we need to quit just starting new cards all the time. We need to get some of this other stuff done, and they can be a champion for the team to help them in that way. The other thing that a project manager can do is they can help the product owner make decisions in terms of both priorities and the amount of feedback and change that comes in. Usually when we do a sprint review or we do demos or whatever your preferred mechanism is to get feedback, we get a lot of it, a lot of things that people want to be different. And if you just pile these things into the backlog, they jump the queue in terms of prioritization, right? So we want our product owners or our committees or however you like to do prioritization, we need them to decide where do those changes fit in terms of the overall scheme. A project manager has a lot of information to contribute in that discussion. A project manager doesn't own that decision. That belongs to the people who are product owners or stakeholders or whoever the people are who are shaping the contents of your product. That's who that decision belongs to. But project managers can have an awful lot of feedback and influence as to how those decisions go. You know, hey, we got this piece of feedback in our last demo, and yeah, it would be great if we could get that out the door, but if you start that now, you're going to put these other things in jeopardy. That's something a project manager can say. And now the product owner is armed with the costs of their decisions. And that will really help with prioritization. And that will really help smooth out the project flow so that the highest value items end up coming out sooner. They end up coming out earlier. Another thing that project managers can do is when they see that the project health might be at risk, as you've defined it, they can be active participants in how to turn that ship around in brainstorming ideas. For example, if we thought up front that the MVP would be done in 3 months, and we've done a few weeks of development, and I'm a project manager, and I start running Monte Carlo simulations on my team's data, and I see, oh, it's not going to be 3 months, it's going to be 4 months, most likely. So what do? Well, we might decide, hey, it's still pretty early. Let's just keep the ship going and see if these metrics change at all. Or we might start having discussions about what we might do differently. Can we cut scope? Can we give some of this work to another team that maybe are working on things that are less on fire or less in our face than this particular team happens to be working on? Can we change our priorities so that the most important things are definitely going to get done by that 3-month deadline? And if some other things get done, that's great, but we're going to take all the risk and we're going to put it on the least important things in the project. These are all discussions that project managers can contribute a lot to. Now, again, a lot of times project managers are not the people who make the final decisions on those things, but the amount of value you can add to teams and upper management to be able to be the advisor, the trusted advisor on flow, the trusted advisor on how the project is actually going, and not only being able to report that out, but to be able to actively make those observations and suggestions that will actively help the team get back on track in terms of project health. You actually become an active participant in that process now, as opposed to being at the mercy of both of those groups. Hey, man, I can only do anything with what people tell me. You know, the developers said this, management said they wanted that. I don't know how we're going to make this work out, but I'm going to tell both groups that management's probably not going to get what they want and developers need to work faster. That's a terrible position to be in. But when you're armed with that metrical data and you really learn how to wield it, you become incredibly valuable to an Agile organization. So don't throw away your project managers. Don't fire them. Don't change their job title to Scrum Masters and call it a day. Many of them probably would rather not be Scrum Masters, to be honest, and you sure don't want somebody who doesn't want to do it doing it. But there's so much value in terms of active management that project managers can bring to the Agile world. Yes, you have to give up a lot of the old ways you were doing things, but there's a bold new world waiting for you, a whole new set of things to learn and ways that you can add value to your Agile organization. So I encourage you to stick with it, hang in there, and enjoy a level of empowerment in your project management role that you might never have had in our old waterfall world. Thanks everyone for listening to Agile Bites. Agile does sometimes bite, but we don't think it always has to. If you enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you happen to be using. And if you can, leave us a comment because we'd love to hear your feedback. What things would you like to hear about? What things did you hear that were valuable to you today? You can also head over to integrityinspired.com to sign up to our email list. But that's all for today, folks. We'll see you next time.